I grew up as the black sheep in a family of high achievers. My brother Jackson was perfect in every way, valedictorian sports star and our parents' pride. In our wealthy Boston suburb, I was always measured against his brilliance and always found wanting. What nobody knew was that I had built my own path, far from their judgmental eyes. When Jackson hired a private investigator to expose my failures, he never expected what would actually be uncovered. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you have ever felt like the family disappointment. Growing up in Brookline, one of Boston's most affluent suburbs, meant living with constant expectations. Our colonial house on Prescott Street had 5 bedrooms, a sprawling backyard, and a weight of expectations that seemed to suffocate only me. My father, Dr. William Taylor, was a renowned cardiovascular surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital. My mother, Elizabeth Taylor, was a tenured law professor at Harvard Law School. Academic excellence was not requested in our household, it was assumed. Then there was Jackson, my older brother, by 5 years. From the moment I could understand words, I heard about Jackson's accomplishments. By the time I entered elementary school, Jackson had already accumulated a trophy shelf that required reinforcement. Class president, 3 years running. Valedictorian, captain of the football team. His science fair projects routinely advanced to state level. When he was 17, he discovered a more efficient method for testing water contamination that attracted attention from MIT researchers. I was intelligent too, but in a different way, that no one seemed to value. While I could conceptualize complex systems and visualize technological solutions, I struggled with the structured learning environment of school. I would later discover I had undiagnosed ADHD, but back then I was just labeled as unmotivated, distracted, or, worst of all, lazy. Why can you not apply yourself like your brother became the soundtrack of my childhood, playing on repeat from teachers, relatives, and especially my parents. One particular memory stands out. I was 11, and it was the school science fair. Jackson, then 16, had created a project on sustainable energy that had already won at the state level and was heading to nationals. My project was a simple app I had coded myself that helped organize study notes. I was incredibly proud of it. I had taught myself basic coding and worked for weeks to get it functioning. When the judges came around, they were impressed, asking if my parents had helped. They had not. In fact, my father had refused to even look at it, busy helping Jackson refine his presentation for nationals. I came in 4th place. Not bad for a first attempt, I thought. But when I showed my parents the ribbon, my mother just smiled tightly and said, "That is nice, Arthur. But maybe next year you can do something more substantial like your brother." The pattern continued through high school. Jackson got accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship. I barely managed to get into Massachusetts State University. At graduation, my father clapped me on the shoulder and said, "College is a fresh start. Maybe you will finally find your motivation there." What they never understood was that I was motivated, just not by the things they valued. While they pushed me toward medicine or law, I was fascinated by technology and app development. My hobby, as they dismissively called it, was my passion. I would stay up late coding, creating small applications, learning about user interface design. When I tried to show my father an app I had developed for medical students to study anatomy, he glanced at it for 10 seconds before changing the subject to Jackson's first-year medical school achievements. By my senior year of college, I had made my decision. I had earned a computer science degree that my parents considered barely acceptable, and I was done trying to live up to impossible standards. The day after graduation, I packed everything I owned into my used Honda Civic and drove to Seattle without telling anyone my plans. I left only a note saying I needed to find my own path. My parents called, of course. They alternated between worry and disappointment, asking why I would throw away networking opportunities in Boston. Jackson called too, his voice containing that familiar mix of concern and condescension. "You know, Arthur, running away does not solve anything. Mom and Dad just want what is best for you." I did not bother explaining that I was not running away. I was running toward something, toward freedom, toward a chance to define success on my own terms. Seattle welcomed me with its rain and its thriving tech industry. What it did not offer immediately was success. I had confidence in my abilities, but the tech world is competitive. My degree from a non-prestigious state school did not open many doors, and I found myself rejected from one company after another. After 27 failed applications and 12 uncomfortable interviews where I was asked why I had not participated in more extracurricular coding competitions because I was working part-time jobs to support myself, unlike my fully funded brother, I finally landed a position. It was hardly glamorous, technical support at a small software company. The pay barely covered my rent for a studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood, but it was a start. By day, I answered calls and emails from frustrated customers. By night, I worked on my own projects, developing apps and learning advanced coding techniques through online courses. My tiny apartment became my workshop. The kitchen table doubled as my desk covered in notes and sketches. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, pouring every spare dollar into server costs and development tools. My parents called monthly, their disappointment palpable even through the phone. I kept our conversations brief, sharing little about my life. When they asked about my job, I was vague, letting them believe I was still struggling to find direction. It was easier than explaining that I was pursuing a path they had never valued. Jackson just bought a house in Cambridge, my mother mentioned during one call, 3 bedrooms close to the hospital. His mentor says he is on track to become the youngest department head in their history. I murmured appropriate congratulations while staring at the code on my screen. The foundation of what I believed could revolutionize secure messaging. 6 months into my Seattle life, everything changed when I met Sam Turner. I was grabbing coffee at a local shop when I overheard someone discussing the exact technical problem I had been working on the night before. I could not help but join the conversation, offering the solution I had discovered. Sam, a 45-year-old veteran of 3 successful tech startups, was impressed. He asked to see my projects, and over the next few weeks, became an unofficial mentor. He saw potential where my family had only seen inadequacy. "You have a unique approach to user privacy," he told me, after reviewing my messaging app prototype. "Most developers treat it as an afterthought. You are building it into the foundation." With Sam's guidance, I refined my ideas and developed SecureLink, a messaging platform with unprecedented privacy features. When it was ready for beta testing, Sam introduced me to potential investors. The first meetings were terrifying. I had never seen myself as a businessman, but when I spoke about my creation, the passion was evident. To my shock, we secured first-round funding of $2 million. The venture capitalists believed in my vision for privacy-focused communication in an increasingly data-mined world. I made a strategic decision then. I would operate under a business pseudonym, Alexander West. The company would be West Innovations, not Arthur Taylor Tech. It was partly practical. I wanted a fresh professional identity, untainted by my past feelings of inadequacy. But it was also personal. I was not ready for my family to know about my success, not when I was still proving it to myself. Over the next 4 years, SecureLink grew from a promising startup to a respected name in secure communications. I expanded from a one-man operation to a team of 15 talented developers and designers. We moved from my apartment to a modest office space, then to an entire floor in a downtown Seattle building. We launched 2 more successful apps, Secure Vault for personal data storage, and Privacy Guard, a comprehensive security suite. Major tech companies began taking notice. We received acquisition offers, $8 million from a social media giant, then $20 million from a larger security firm. I declined them all. This was my creation, my vision, and I was not ready to relinquish control. By the 5-year mark since leaving Boston West, Innovations was valued at $40 million. I personally was worth about $28 million. I bought a beautiful house overlooking Puget Sound, but kept a modest apartment downtown as my official residence, the one I would mention if family ever asked for my address. In our monthly calls, which had decreased in frequency over the years, I continued to be vague about my work. Still in tech support, but looking at some development opportunities, I would say, or working on a small project with some potential. It was not exactly lying, but it was far from the whole truth. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment to reveal my success, but deep down I knew I was protecting myself. What if they dismissed my achievements? What if Jackson had done something even more impressive? What if they took credit for my success despite never supporting my passion? So I maintained my secret life, as Arthur Taylor, estranged son and parent underachiever, while quietly building an empire as Alexander West, innovative tech entrepreneur. The dual identity felt strange but necessary, a shield protecting the confidence I had so carefully built. Then came the call about my father's 65th birthday. My mother was planning a combination birthday and retirement celebration. After decades of saving lives as a surgeon, my father was stepping back from his practice. It would be a grand affair at the Boston Harbor Hotel with colleagues, friends, and family flying in from around the country. "We have not seen you in 5 years, Arthur," my mother said, her voice carrying that familiar mix of guilt and authority. "Your father would never say it, but he wants you there." I considered declining. I had built a life without their validation. Did I need to subject myself to their judgment again? But something had changed in me over the years. Success had given me confidence. Perhaps it was time to return, not as the failure they remembered, but as the man I had become. "I will be there," I said finally, "just for the weekend." I did not know then that Jackson had other plans for my homecoming. The Boston Harbor Hotel was exactly the type of venue my parents would choose. Elegant, traditional, with sweeping views of the harbor that screamed old money New England. I arrived in a rented Audi, nice enough to avoid comments about my financial situation, but not flashy enough to prompt questions. My mother greeted me with a tight hug that felt more obligatory than warm. "Arthur, you look healthy," she said, clearly searching for something positive to say about my appearance. I had kept in shape and dressed well in a tailored suit, but I knew she was noting my longer hair and the casual West Coast style that had influenced my wardrobe. My father shook my hand firmly. "Good to see you, son. Jackson tells us you are still in customer service." The question carried his perpetual disappointment. "Something like that," I replied vaguely. "Congratulations on your retirement, Dad." Before he could probe further, Jackson arrived, making an entrance that commanded attention. He pulled up in a brand new Mercedes S-Class, helping his wife Sophia from the passenger seat with practiced gallantry. Jackson had always been handsome in that classical way that photographs well for medical journals. Now at 35, he looked every inch the successful doctor, perfectly tailored suit, expensive watch, and the confident posture of someone who has never questioned his place in the world. Sophia was exactly what I expected in Jackson's wife. Former beauty queen turned philanthropist with a Stanford business degree and family connections to Boston's elite. They looked like they had stepped out of a luxury lifestyle magazine. Jackson embraced me with the enthusiastic hug of someone performing for an audience. "Little brother." The prodigal son returns. He stepped back, holding me at arm's length as he assessed me. "Seattle must agree with you." Though I expected more flannel and a beard, he laughed at his own joke. The evening proceeded as I had anticipated. 200 guests mingled and dined while celebrating my father's illustrious career. I stood awkwardly at the edge of conversations, nursing a single scotch, as distant relatives and family friends approached with the inevitable questions. "Are you still in Seattle? What exactly do you do there? Have you thought about coming back to Boston? Your brother could probably help you find something more substantial." I gave noncommittal answers, watching as Jackson worked the room. He moved from group to group, his arm around Sophia, accepting congratulations for his recent publication in the New England Journal of Medicine. Several times I caught him looking in my direction, a calculating expression on his face. At dinner, I was seated at the family table, but noticeably farther from my parents than Jackson and Sophia. As the servers brought out the main course, Jackson tapped his glass for attention. "I would like to propose a toast to my father," he announced, standing tall. "The man who taught me everything about excellence, precision, and the relentless pursuit of success. Dad, you showed me that greatness is not accidental, but the result of unwavering dedication. Your legacy lives on not just in the lives you have saved, but in the values you have instilled in your sons." He glanced at me, adding with a smile that did not reach his eyes, "Both of your sons, each finding his own level." The subtle dig was not lost on me, nor on our parents, who shifted uncomfortably. The guests, oblivious to the subtext, raised their glasses in agreement. Later, as the party wound down, I stepped onto the terrace for fresh air. I overheard Jackson and Sophia talking around the corner, their voices low but distinct in the night air. "Are you sure about this?" Jackson Sophia was asking. Hiring someone to investigate your own brother seems extreme. My blood ran cold as Jackson replied, I need to know what he is really doing out there. 5 years with barely any contact. Vague answers about his job. Something does not add up. What if he is involved in something illegal? It could reflect badly on the family, on my practice. And if he is just failing like you suspect, Sophia asked, then at least we will know. Dad keeps asking me if I think Arthur will ever get his act together. This way I can finally give him an honest answer. I slipped away before they could discover me, my mind racing. My own brother was having me investigated. The mixture of anger and disbelief was overwhelming, yet beneath it lay a strange sense of anticipation. Jackson was looking for failure but was about to discover something entirely different. The next morning at the family brunch, I watched Jackson with new awareness. He was overly friendly, asking questions about my life in Seattle with sudden interest. What part of the city do you live in? He asked casually. I gave him the address of my downtown apartment, the modest one-bedroom I kept for appearances, not my actual waterfront home. And this tech support job? What company is it with again? I mentioned TechServe Solutions, a real company where I had briefly contracted for consulting work, though I had no current affiliation. I played along, feeding him the breadcrumbs that would lead his investigator down the initial path I had created. After the weekend concluded, I returned to Seattle knowing I was about to be followed. Sure enough, I spotted the surveillance almost immediately. The private investigator was good, but I was expecting him. A gray sedan that appeared too often. A man with a camera in the coffee shop across from my decoy apartment. I maintained my routine for a few days, going to my downtown office where I sometimes worked when I wanted privacy from my team. Then deliberately, I began to let the real picture emerge. I drove to my actual company headquarters one morning, using my private parking space labeled CEO. I wore my Alexander West ID badge clearly visible. I conducted a board meeting in a glass-walled conference room. The next day, I drove to my real home, the modern glass and steel house on a private road overlooking the water. I collected my mail addressed to Arthur Taylor, not Alexander West. I made sure the investigator could get clear photos of me entering both properties. A week later, I arranged an all-hands company meeting where I gave a presentation on our quarterly results and upcoming product launch. The company logo, West Innovations, was prominently displayed behind me. I knew the investigator would be documenting everything. Finally, I visited my bank and investment manager, reviewing statements that would clearly show my net worth. It was a performance for an audience of one, the invisible investigator who was about to report back to my brother with news that would shatter his perception of his failing younger brother. 2 weeks after returning from Boston, I received a text from an unknown number, financial records obtained. Company ownership confirmed. Sending full report to client tomorrow. The PI had discovered everything and was giving me a heads up. It was an unusual professional courtesy. I wondered if something in my story had resonated with him. Perhaps he too knew what it was like to be underestimated. I texted back a single word, thanks. Now I just had to wait for the bomb to detonate in Boston. I did not have to wait long. 3 days later, my office receptionist called, Mr. Taylor, there is a Jackson Taylor here demanding to see you. He seems quite agitated. Security is asking what you would like them to do. I took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived sooner than expected. Send him up, I replied, and hold my calls. The elevator doors opened and Jackson stormed into my office. Gone was the polished, controlled doctor. His face was flushed, his normally perfect hair disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it repeatedly during the red-eye flight from Boston. What the hell is this? He demanded, slapping a folder onto my desk. Inside were the PI's reports, photos of my home, my office, screenshots of West Innovation's website, with my face clearly shown, financial statements indicating my net worth. It appears to be the results of your investigation, I replied calmly, leaning back in my chair. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind me showcased the Seattle skyline, a backdrop that emphasized my success in a way words never could. This is some kind of mistake, Jackson insisted, his voice rising. You cannot be worth $28 million. You cannot be CEO of a tech company. You are Arthur, the family screw-up. The raw honesty of his outburst was actually refreshing. No more subtle digs or condescending remarks, just the unfiltered truth of how he saw me. "I am Arthur Taylor," I said quietly, "and I am also Alexander West, founder and CEO of West Innovations. Both are true." Jackson collapsed into the chair across from me, staring as if seeing me for the first time. "Why the fake name? Why the secrecy? Why let us think you were struggling all these years?" It was the question I had anticipated, yet hearing it spoken aloud hit differently. I stood and walked to the window, gathering my thoughts. "Do you remember my science fair project in 6th grade? The app I coded myself?" Jackson frowned. "Vaguely. Some study tool I came in 4th place. Not bad for an 11-year-old who taught himself coding. When I showed Mom and Dad my ribbon, Mom said maybe next year I could do something more substantial like your brother." That was the moment I realized nothing I did would ever be good enough unless it was exactly what they wanted. I turned back to face him, so I stopped trying to earn their approval. I decided to build something for myself, by myself. The pseudonym was initially practical, a fresh start, but then it became a way to protect what I was building from the family judgment that had always torn me down. "You did all this to spite us?" Jackson asked, incredulous. "No," I replied firmly. "I did all this for me. Spite had nothing to do with it. I just needed space to succeed on my own terms." Jackson was silent for a long moment. Then unexpectedly his shoulders sagged. The perfect posture he had maintained for 35 years seemed to give way under some invisible weight. "Do you know what Dad said when I told him I was hiring a PI?" he asked quietly. He said, "No need to waste money. Arthur will never amount to anything significant. He lacks the Taylor drive for excellence." I flinched despite myself. "And do you know what terrified me most about that statement?" Jackson continued. "That someday he might say the same about me. One failure, one misstep, and I could fall from grace just as you had." It was a stunning admission from my perfect brother. In that moment, I saw beyond the polished exterior to the exhausted man beneath, someone who had spent his entire life running on a treadmill of expectations, terrified of the day he might stumble. "The perfect son act must be exhausting," I said, not unkindly. "You have no idea," he whispered. "Every achievement just raises the bar for the next one. I have not taken a real vacation in 7 years. Sophia and I have been trying to have a baby, but the fertility treatments and my work schedule." He trailed off, looking around my office. "And all this time you were building an empire." "An empire built on being exactly who I am," I replied, "not who someone else wanted me to be." Something shifted in Jackson's expression. Respect, perhaps. Or envy. Possibly both. "What happens now?" he asked. "Will you tell Mom and Dad?" I had been considering this question since discovering Jackson's investigation. The answer came with surprising clarity. Yes. But not to prove them wrong, or to boast. I think it is time for honest conversations in our family, starting with the fact that I have ADHD, diagnosed 3 years ago. Those motivation problems they always criticized me for had a neurological basis. Jackson looked stunned. They will be shocked by all of this. Probably. But maybe it is time we all stop pretending to be who we are not. The conversation lasted hours. For the first time, Jackson and I spoke as equals, as brothers rather than competitors. He confessed his own struggles with anxiety and imposter syndrome. I shared the loneliness of my early years in Seattle. We laughed about family memories seen through our very different perspectives. By evening, we had sketched out a plan. Jackson would return to Boston but would not reveal my secret. That was for me to do in my own way. We agreed I would fly out in 2 weeks for a family dinner where everything would be laid bare. As we parted at my office door, Jackson hesitated, then pulled me into a genuine hug, the first since we were children. "For what it is worth," he said gruffly, "what you have built here is impressive as hell. No comparisons needed." It was perhaps the first compliment he had ever given me that did not come with a subtle reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. 2 weeks later, I sat at my parents' dining table and revealed the truth, showing them the company website, the financial statements, the press coverage that Alexander West had received. Their shock was palpable, but beneath it lay a dawning recognition that perhaps they had fundamentally misunderstood their younger son all along. The healing was not instantaneous. There were difficult conversations about why I had felt the need to hide my success, about the damage done by constant comparison, about the different ways people can excel in this world. My mother cried when I explained my ADHD diagnosis and how their perception of laziness had deepened my sense of inadequacy. Over the following months, we began rebuilding our relationships on a foundation of truth rather than expectations. I established a family foundation focused on supporting children with learning differences, turning our family story into something constructive. Jackson and I started collaborating on a medical app that combined his clinical expertise with my technical knowledge. For the first time, we were partners rather than rivals. As for me, I finally integrated my two identities. Arthur Taylor and Alexander West became one person, just me defining success on my own terms. Looking back now, I realize that success without genuine connection is ultimately hollow. The millions in my bank account brought security but not happiness. That came from finally being seen and accepted for who I really am. My journey taught me that family expectations can both motivate and damage. The same pressure that crushed me pushed Jackson toward excellence, but at a cost to his well-being that he is only now beginning to address. I learned that finding your own path is not selfish but necessary. That defining personal success means listening to your own voice above the chorus of others' opinions. And that keeping secrets even with good intentions creates barriers to genuine connection. Most importantly, I discovered the healing power of honesty. When I finally revealed my true self, both my success and my struggles, it opened the door to authentic relationships based on reality rather than performance. Today, my family relationships are stronger because they are rooted in truth. We have moved beyond the golden child and black sheep dynamics to something more nuanced and genuine. What about you? How do you define success in your own life? Is it measured by money, achievements, relationships, or something entirely different? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics and personal growth. And if you know someone struggling with family expectations, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we are not alone in these struggles makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the only approval that ultimately matters is your own.